Howdy, all you delicious people. I am here today to review The Natural. So, it came naturally to me to want to cover this film after hearing the passing of Robert Redford. This man has had a iconic career that given us so many amazing films that at some point it's not quite good enough to just honor him with one, but I'm going to try to. Because, of course, a lot of go tos would probably be things like I just watched The Last Castle 2 days ago, Brubaker, uh, Jeremiah Johnson. There is a movie called Spy Games that has Robert Redford and Brad Pitt that I think is really good. That is to be quasi similar to the Colin Farrell Al Pacino kind of movie. It kind of feels similar to that of The Recruit, and it has this like Operation Dinner Out thing going on in it. Uh, those of you that probably think I didn't see the movie whatsoever. And there's also just classics like The Electric Chair and Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid, I believe the title of that name is, that eventually I will go on and see, possibly within the maybe the following days. I'm not quite sure. Horse Whisper, to some of you out there also. Yeah, like the list goes on and on and on. And I'm sure the one that's your favorite is to be the one that I'm not mentioning. And you may have your own thoughts about what is to be your favorite Robert Redford film. I then will go on and say, yeah, there is also just a load of really good baseball films. But I feel that this is probably one of the better ones, if not one of at least the best baseball films within a top five. Because I know a lot of people go on and Field of Dreams and Sandlots and not to mention Rookie of the Year, Funky Butt Lovin'. Yes, I remember Funky Butt Lovin'. Uh, but so, and I'm sure there's others, but I just don't want to take the time because it's not exactly the League of Their Own, just to really go on and give more diversity here. But anyways, but back to the film here. Back to the focus on a man and honoring him. Robert Redford goes on and always plays the best guy in a perfect film, and that always is hard to execute. But Robert always did it so well. And with a movie like The Natural, we come to find out that this story is actually to be about a real person that they went on to make a book about that they eventually turned into a film. And also, speaking of Robert Redford needing to be perfect, Robert Redford had to go on and do a lot of his own stuff in this film. Like, every time he has to go on and need to be in the outfield and catch the ball, that's actually him going on and doing so every single time. As well as also, there are actually to have been times while filming where Robert was actually supposed to strike out, but he hit a home run instead. To where they're just like, Robert, yeah, you need to actually strike out right now in this film. And he's like, oh yeah, I'm sorry, I just like everyone was behind me, I got caught up in the moment, and so they're like, yeah, it's fine, like it's okay, but you need to actually strike out in this part of the film. So, but he would go on and just kind of smack home runs, more consistently, just kind of for fun. Um, but I think also, considering that this is a very much heroic like character, yeah, it's kind of hard not to want to swing if you want to go on it and uh, take something from the Mel Gibson movie Signs. So The Natural gives us a story about a young lad who is to lose his father and have lightning strike a tree right in front of his window. And he decides to go on and chop the tree down and carve a baseball bat out of it. And then goes on to seemingly be told by his father, well, son, you have a gift, but that doesn't mean anything. You're going to have to go on and work for it. You're going to have to work still for that, like, kind of really having Roy's father, who's the main character here, played by Robert Redford, to just be like, well, hey, like, life shouldn't have to come so easy to you. And if anything, it's going to build character along the way. And eventually, when Roy makes the bad choices and really it can go on and be a number of things that Roy's life was to go on and be all planned out for him. And when he course corrects, when he does other things, that's when things morally start to slump or start to have his moral compass be affected, which goes on to make him not as good as a batter, go on and almost get killed, and eventually goes on to have him disappear because his life didn't go according to plan. So Roy goes on to disappear from baseball because he was to almost get killed. And an interesting aspect of this movie, there are to go on and be at a point in this film where I was to actually go on and make a joke. In my mind, I was like, and he's dead. And then the very next scene, they're like, yeah, we're here to honor this guy who had gone on to get killed. I'm like, wait a minute, what? I was like, wait a minute, what? Like, I know I had gone on and seen this movie quite a long time ago, but I did not expect someone to die in this film. And that was to just be like taken just so hilarious to me because like I called it, even though logically I was just making in my mind just a joke. But I'm like, dang man, am I good? Specifically when I just called the death before it happened. But so we make our way into the story of this film. So Roy goes on and restarts his life, magically going on and reconnecting with Iris, who is to seemingly be his soulmate or his true love. Having also Roy reconnect with baseball after a 16-year gap absence. And it is kind of interesting when Roy just appears on this New York Knights baseball team, which oddly is to go on and actually just be a fictional team that they put together for this story. But then again, also, there are references of actual other baseball teams like the Chicago Cubs, or there seems to be some outfits that look similar to actually major league teams. I kind of assumed that maybe the reason why they were to go on and put New York Knights for this story was to try to avoid uh, any kind of potential uh, like lawsuits or any kind of something with them using New York Yankees on here and them like having the MLB or the major leagues or whatever just kind of getting upset with this movie using the obvious likenesses or images of that team specifically, but I guess maybe that just wasn't the case. Or maybe the movie would have easily gone on and went with the whole Yankees thing, and but just Knights was just more interesting for that book. But either way, we just gotta create this fictional team and have fun with it. So, because that's why obviously you have movies like Any Given Sunday where they have to like reinvent a whole entire team just to avoid lawsuits. And so that's why you would go on and have those happenings of those kind of projects because it deals with certain bits of content. So, and of course, the Any Given Sunday story is actually a legitimate story, also. The Natural goes on to crank out home run after home run after home run up until a certain point where eventually Roy is to go on and be seduced by evil. Because, of course, there is a whole crux of guys like Gus or the judge that is to consistently try to seduce Roy with money or to be like, well, hey, like we definitely need to go on and give you more money on your contract. And Roy's like, well, yeah, if you go on and you make sense of it, like I guess, and they're like, dude, shouldn't you be asking for more money? How you're just like freaking just batting so well and this and that, and Roy's just like, yeah, whatever. Like I didn't come here for that. Like I just came here to play the game. And they're like, play the game? No, think of your future. Come on, Roy. And so Roy's like, dude, I don't care about the money. Like, I just came here to just, like, finally live my dream. And it seems that more and more, morally, his dream is being affected by these people that don't want him to play, that don't want him to do well, that don't want him to swing. And Roy more and more is just like, you know what? I'm going to put my life on the line if it means that I can go on and just go out there and swing the effing bat. And while going on and risking his life, Roy goes on to find out that there's a part of his life that he had no knowledge of. Besides how things were to have turned out between Roy and Iris, that there seems to be quite a bit of a secret that Roy is to go on and get revealed to him. It's like, oh, all right, well, like this drives Roy to have, by the end of this movie, too many reasons to go on and swing for the fences. Because not only does Roy get back his good moral compass, but then also the team is literally riding on the success of the pennant being won and the games going on to uh, play out and winning the way they do, to where it all comes down to this seemingly one game. So I found this movie to be rather enjoyable. It's freaking epic. It's amazing. I really do go on and like this. It also kind of reminds me of Major League, where we have the coach that goes on and tells the team, "Yeah, we have to win the pennant, or otherwise, the person that owns the team is going to go on and sell it all off, and all you guys are going to go your separate ways, and so on and so forth." To where they're like, "Well, now we have to win the pennant because there's nothing else we can go on and do but that." So, and oddly, we have Roy that coincidentally joins the team at that exact time, when he's only gone on and been on another team for 2 whole weeks, and then he had high school experience. Yeah, not a big, huge, lavish resume, to the point of, like, Roy in this movie is such a mystery, and every bit of every line is to be perfectly continuing on when they ask him these questions. It seems that he has to go on and kind of duck and dive all the answers, and not to really reveal who he is, or at some points, when obviously he bumps into old friends, Roy is to kind of play it off as like, "Oh no, I don't remember you at all," even though he obviously remembers him. Kind of like Max, the reporter. Max goes on and looks at Roy. It's like, "Where do I know you from?" And Roy is like, "Yeah, I don't know you," but he knew, he remembered, and still he's just like, "Man, I kind of want to make my past just go away." And then eventually Max figures it out, and then like shoves it in his face to be like, "Well, hey man, like, either me or the judge are going to go on and bring up this story, and hey, you don't want to go on and look bad in front of your fans." And then Roy is just like, "Dude, bring it up, like, I don't care." Like, again, I'm still, Roy is still going to go on and hope that he can play baseball after this, or obviously uh right off in the sunset, like he goes on and does by the end of this film. Just be like, "Hey man, like, I don't need to teach, or I don't need to be a baseball player. I can go on and teach it." And that'll be the way that he rides off into the sunset. So let me know in the comments below any of the things that I'm going on and either talk about here, either your favorite Robert Redford movie, your favorite baseball film, your favorite just sports movie in general. Maybe you like a sports show of some kind. But either way, it's about that time to just say, let's push on into the full breakdown of this movie and spoilers and what have you. Because really, also at this point, I'm sure a lot of people probably will get the gist of this movie, or insist that they are to go on, like, "Oh yeah, I'll check out this film," because they are to go on and like it. So, going on into exactly where you can go on and see said piece, I know that there are probably a number of Google options, I'm sure, to probably see this film, but I'm going to go on and recommend, if you don't want to rent or buy this movie or whichever, then by all means, I would probably insist people go on and have, if they are to have mobile devices that are to go into a Google Play Store, you can go on, and I would probably recommend a tablet or an iPad, but it's all about everyone's financial affordability to do whatever. And maybe you just have a phone and that's you. Just being honest. I would go on to recommend a app called Zelifonic, Zelivonic, or Moopzy, Moopzzi. Justifiably, you can go onto these two apps and watch seemingly anything you effing want for absolutely free. Moopzy, in my honest opinion, the way in which that I went into it, like the servers were to go on and kind of be very sketch of it being put on right away. Like I think I went down into like the 720p ones, whereas like I always try X Prime 720. That server seems to be always the consistent thing that always works. So I dropped all the way down to there, and then I watched the movie. I'm like, okay, watch the film, great, and then got my thumbnails um, and my things that I can go on and use for this review, and then kind of watched it on. Yeah, I also had to go on and watch a movie that had like the better of subtitles because when I went into the other app, I'm like, yeah, these subtitles suck. Because they didn't mesh well. So I had to kind of go to another thing just to get a good set of subtitles. But anyways, so let me know in the comments below also what could be the most interesting thing about this film. Maybe it's the whole lightning striking and the guy carves up the bat. Or maybe any number of scenes that kind of strike out to you. But anyways, so I think it's about that time to go into spoiler time. Spoiler time. It's about that time I'm going to spoil this movie. Hopefully you want to go on and drop anything down in the comments because it does help out the video, it does help out the channel, but logically also, hopefully, you're also drop something I hope very more positive. God dang lately. I am to just consistently just deal with like this and that, and I'm just like, you know what? Life is so effing short that I think we need to go on and realize that one day it could all just go away. So, and we could all disappear. So, you know what? Like, let's try and at least realize that everyone are human beings and that everyone probably also makes effing mistakes. Uh, but also, no one is perfect either. And if they are, then man, they're probably a Robert Redford. So, with that said, uh, let's go on and let's get out my cast list, or I insist is to go on and help me, obviously, talk about this film. I don't think oh yeah, for Robert Redford movies, I probably have to obviously state Captain America: Winter Soldier, the movie where Robert Redford eventually kind of breaks away from his normal roles. Let's just say for those of you that still haven't seen Captain America: Winter Soldier, he turns evil. Oh no, spoilers of that film that obviously people should have gone on and seen by now. But yeah, but so uh, with that said, let's pause this video here and let's whip out my thing. I'm gonna try as much as possible to not just get so lost into the beats of the movie where obviously there's a huge amount of like detail from game to game, or there's also probably way too many news articles where you have to go on and state that it's like, oh, they're winning 4 in a row, or they're losing 4 in a row, or they're blah 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 blah, they're on the hot streak, they're not on the hot streak, oh my god, up and down, blah 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 blah. And yeah, but I'm gonna try to tell more of the story, then get more caught up in the whole details of every single baseball game, with the exclusion of certain times where it does kind of affect the story in a way. But anyways, let's go out of our way to pause here and whip this out. Okay, so the very beginning of this movie has Robert Redford sitting next to this train station, and as the train starts to go by and it seemingly doesn't stop, we have Robert that jumps on Roy Hobbs, that jumps onto the train, and that's where we kind of start this tale off. We get to a younger Roy, and he's going on to throw the ball back and forth with his father Ed, and we go on to have Ed that decides to just draw this chalk-like circle and is to tell his son Roy, "Hey, uh, this is your target, Roy. Go on and try to see if you can hit this target." And Roy easily goes on and does so, and it ends up kind of wrecking their chicken coop because this is a farm, and so Roy is a farmer, and we even have at one point where Pop is going like, "Yeah, I should have been a farmer," and it's kind of interesting seeing the character Pop in this film because I'm so used to going on and remembering that the actor who plays Pop in this movie for his diabetes commercials, sadly enough. But also, like, I obviously remember him from like movies like Cocoon, also, or even the Jean Claude movie Hard Target. But yeah, but like, I think there was to go on and be a point of juncture of me of just kind of remembering the diabetes commercials, and then like watching this movie, I'm like, God dang, is he a good actor? God dang, is he really good at this role that they give him in this film? But everybody's really just solid in this movie across the board. But so, but back to this film. So Ed goes on and tells his son as they continue to throw the ball back and forth, like, well, son, you got a gift, Roy, but it's not enough. Rely too much on your own gift, and you'll fail. It's good character building, bit of thing there. So, as the two of them consistently throw the ball back and forth, as my voice tends to just crack by me having to go on and just try to think of what I'm saying next, we have Iris's family that is going on and crying out for her. As Iris is like, well, okay, it's time to go on home, gotta go. And that seems to be like her catchphrase throughout this entire movie. You gotta go, I gotta go, we gotta go, everybody's gotta go. So it almost feels like there's a callback to that. So now we cut to Ed, who is chopping down some wood and ends up having a heart attack. Like every movie that we've ever gone on and seen that is to have a son or daughter lose a family member. Also, like, this movie to me also seems very similar in some ways of Superman when you really think about it. Roy, in some aspects, is to be very much a superhero like guy. He has to go on and accomplish so many feats that seem so unique and baffling to everyone, and they call him unbelievable, and like how he is to be just so perfect at going on and being able to swing the bat, or even striking out a character named Whammer, who we'll find out later in the film is to be a character that seems very much like a Babe Ruth like character. But so, Roy is going on and fixing his bike and then notices his father falls to the ground. Roy is to try to go on and see whether or not his father is still alive. And then we, of course, realize that his father had passed away. So the next thing we see here is strikes of lightning that are to showcase Roy's room and the banners and baseball memorabilias of some kind. Because Roy, I feel, was born to be a baseball player. And every bit of everything is going to be within his room, just kind of connected to that. So here's where Roy pops his head out his window to come to find that his tree in front of his window is going to be struck by lightning. And then there's this weird glow that we see coming from the darkness. And so Roy goes on, chops down this tree, is to go on to carve up this bit of lumber and makes a bat out of it that says Wonder Boy, and then has a carved up lightning strike on the bat also. Then we cut to a seemingly much older, more Robert Redford Roy that is to make his way to Iris's home. And it's kind of interesting how we have to go on and try to make these characters look as young as possible, but it's also very goofy, in my opinion. How these characters have to try as best they can to play these younger selves, to try to look younger. It just doesn't quite work out, in my opinion. But I think also it's better if they don't go on and just consistently have like, oh, this is Roy from this age. Oh, now this is Roy from that age. It could be very confusing to the viewer. It's just like, okay, like, is this the same guy? So at some point they're kind of cutting the quick to get to Robert's character. And so we have Roy that goes on and again throws rocks at Iris's window. She opens the window up. Roy asks if he can see her. And so Roy and Iris run to one another as, of course, Iris is asking Roy, it's like, well, hey, what is it? Like, what do you need to tell me? So Roy goes on and tells Iris that the Cubs have sent for him. So actually, yeah, we do have actual baseball teams that are referenced in this film, or stuff like Pittsburgh or uh, Philadelphia Phillies, I think, is to quasi get used here in this movie. So yeah, like they're all actual baseball teams, but for some reason they just chose the LA Knights in this movie. But anyways, back to the film. So Roy's gonna go on to do a tryout here. So he hasn't quite made it to the team. He has to go on and audition or do a screen test, if you want to go on and throw up movie terms. So, but a tryout, yeah, tryout. Anyways, so uh, Iris immediately thinks that Roy's gonna make it, and is like, nah, there's probably so many guys, there's so many athletes that are just like him that he's probably gonna get lost in the shuffle. And Iris is like, no, with your arm, like, man, would your dad be proud of you? So, uh, so Roy is gonna have to promise that he's gonna try his best and reach for it. And so Roy and Iris go on to have this moment where they run off to this, run off into this farm, and Roy is like, oh my god, like everything is happening so fast. I've never been on a train before. And Roy turns to Iris, is like, well, you know what? Like, I love you so much. Like, will you marry me? And it seems that they're to go on and say their I do's. And Roy is to go on and tell Iris, like, well, hey, I'm going to send for you. Yeah, that probably is not going to transpire the way that we hope it would. Also, it is kind of rather interesting how we have to probably narrow down exactly when Roy is to go on and do something else here that leads to the later part of this film. Wait a minute. When did they go on and do some lovin's, if you know what I mean? When exactly did they have some real romantic times that leads to the later part of the movie? When did that transpire? Uh, but anyways, so we have this train that comes and makes its way to eventually stop, and so Roy is to be on this train, and a person making their way into this train is a person named Harriet, who will go on to find is to throw a wrench into Roy's plans. And I mean really F up his life. And so the next thing we see is Max and the Whammer, as it seems that already this guy is to be so world famous, this Whammer baseball character, that he's already going on and getting people asking for his autograph. And the Whammer is like, well, hey, are you sure it's for your kid and not for you? And the guy's like, hey, like my son is just such a fan. It's like, oh, all right, okay, like I believe you. So one thing I probably should have said, even in the non spoiler part of this, is there is obviously this story that people should focus on that I think could get quickly lost by a number of people when eventually they recount it later on because they bring this story back up. So Max goes on about a story about an Olympic athlete that was shot. Just shortly thereafter, a football player was also killed as well. And every single one of these athletes were to go on and get killed via this silver bullet. And Max is to go on and count that as such a wild story. Why a silver bullet? Are all of these athletes to be werewolves, or does also the killer just have a wild fascination with the Lone Ranger? Don't quite get it, but if anything, maybe we can also aspire to think the reasoning for a person going on killing these athletes in their absolute prime is maybe there is some kind of weird agenda going on that maybe certain people are to go on and try to snuff out the best possible athlete so that way the games would not be so rigged. That could be kind of some weird conspiracy theory, but like I would much rather assume that a person is to kind of be acting on their own fruition here. Uh, but anyways, so it is actually rather interesting how everything is to go on and have the Whammer be such a important prospect for baseball that when Roy, the main character of this film, comes into the fray, they treat him as a nothing. They honestly do. They just go on and like, oh yeah, Roy, hey, yeah, you're here. I don't care. Like, if anything, look at this guy. Look at the Whammer. Look how impressive he is. Look how beefy this man is. Yeah, give me some of that beef. And that's all they give a shit about because they don't know who Roy is. They've never heard of him. And when eventually he blows them out of the water, they're like, "Oh, okay, who the heck is this Roy guy? Like, uh, what a, I don't want to use the word miracle, but like, I think that is to kind of be fitting in a way. But anyways, so with that said, we have a guy named Sam Simpson that's coming in, and he was to have been the one who had scouted Roy. And so we have Roy, or we have Sam that goes in and is to kind of do his introductions between both Max and the Whammer, and Sam is to go on to have heard of Max, and then obviously to have heard of the Whammer. But it's like, well, hey, you look a little different in your street clothes, just out of your outfit. And eventually the Whammer will go on and hear that even from Roy, like, man, we got a pattern going on here. So we have Sam that goes on and brings in Roy, and yeah, again, Roy is kind of treated as a nothing, and so we have Max that even when he hears about Roy's no hitters, it's like, well, uh, like that doesn't really mean a whole hill of beans. Just wait till you get to the majors, son, kind of thing. So Max goes on and goes right back to the Whammer, and here's where Harriet goes on to make her way into this train and probably has her eyes on the prize of going after Whammer here. So they go on and they stop the train and they make their way to this amusement park. We obviously have these certain, uh, of course, uh, Ferris wheels or whatever, assortment of all these kind of rides of some kind. I always get the Ferris wheel, the merry-go-round, or whatever. I always get those things always confused. But it's so because it's just the spinning wheel of a thing, and I always have to have it like implanted in my notes of what all these rides are, but it doesn't really matter because it doesn't hugely affect the story of what these things are. But unless something plays into it. But obviously, I shouldn't probably actually care what any of these rides are actually called because it doesn't really tie into the story. But anyway, so the Whammer, of course, goes into this batting cage and ends up going on and continuing to hit these balls. To where, of course, we have these signs that say play ball, and then there's to, of course, be a single, double, triple, home run, and of course, we have the Whammer that goes on and just kind of continues to hit the home run banner. And so Whammer is impressing everybody. Even little kids are like, wow, he's hitting home runs. Wow. So Harriet and Max are to go on and be like, all right, like, look at that guy. Look at that specimen. So we have Max that goes on to claim that the Whammer is to be the best that ever was, the best there is now, and the best that ever will be. So what is he, Bret the Hitman Hart? If you guys don't know who Bret the Hitman Hart is, like there's the whole quote about that, where he goes on and has that, oh, the best that was, the best that there is, and the best there ever will be. Like that's realistically the whole quote of Bret Hart here. So I gotta tie in pro wrestling to a baseball film. So we have the Whammer that, of course, goes on like, all right, folks. So we have Max is like, well, hey, come on, Whammer. We got a good audience out here, and everybody wants to go on and see more, but the Whammer makes the joke of like, well, hey, all you have to do is buy a ticket and come to Chicago then, and everybody just like starts to laugh. So they go on and they just hand him this bat, like, hey, here's a consolation prize for you just hitting so many home runs. We'll give you the bat, and so they end up claiming that Whammer is the best baseball player in the country, and so we then all of a sudden next we see Hobbs. Hobbs is going on and practicing within these bits of games here to try and go on and take these balls and throw them at these barrels that have these, of course, metal containers on it. And you always probably want to go on and say that those things are probably be rigged. But with the way that Roy is to be throwing in these balls, like, yeah, there's no way that these things won't knock over. So, for just the pure speed and the pure accuracy that Roy has. So, Roy is going on and decimating uh, these containers upon this barrel. And so we, of course, have the Whammer that walks by Roy. It's like, oh, hey, Busher, pitch one in here. I'll knock it to the moon. And everybody goes on and laughs. And, like, we, of course, have these people that have to bump into one another so that way they can get this challenge going. So we have Sam that goes on and is talking to Max and Whammer. It's like, well, hey, I bet you $10 that he strikes out Whammer with 3 pitches. And they go on and they call Sam an old boozer and that your brain is full of mush. And he's like, no. Like, I, like, like they go on like, well, yeah, even if he had 100 pitches, because that's the normal baseball. Like most of pitchers should throw 100 pitches and then strike, strike out a number of people and so on and so forth. And yeah, but anyways, so but Sam claims it's like no, 3 of them is all he'll need. So we now have Harriet that goes on to say like, well, I love a contest of skill. So that goes on to have Whammer. It's like, oh, well, you do, honey, so do I. So Whammer turns to Roy. It's like, oh, right, what about you, Huckleberry? And it is kind of interesting here because they end up saying to Roy, it's like, well, hey, like, do you want to warm up? Do you want to go on and kind of practice before going up against the Whammer? And Roy is like, no, my arm is warm up already. And in a lot of, you just got on to see Roy go and knock down all of these containers. So you would think, yeah, his arm would be pretty warmed up. And the question of that is just kind of interesting to me. So we have Max that's like, all right, if you guys are so interested in doing this, let's go on and do the safe route so no one gets hurt. So they make their way to this field, and Max walks his way to 60 feet 6 inches and says it's like, okay, if we're going to do this, we're going to do it in a professional manner to where there's actually a pitching mound and it's the right distance and so on and so forth. So even though this is obviously just a green field, and it's also kind of funny how Max goes on and walks his 60 feet, but then he walks away from that exact position of where he should have actually just stood in until Roy arrives. But anyways, so Max goes on and is to kind of talk about the rules and state that Max will go on and be the one to call the balls or strikes or not. And it's also kind of rather interesting once Roy starts to really bring the heat, how Max eventually goes on to just kind of like, yeah, I'm going to step back a little bit. Because if Sam is honestly kind of getting hurt the way he is by catching these balls, like Max is like, dude, I'm not gonna go on and freaking get hurt. So I'm gonna just step my way back because who knows how controlled this guy really is. So Roy steps in with Sam and they make their way to the supposed mound. And Roy tells Sam, it's like, you know what, I wish you wouldn't have gone on and put money on me. Uh, but Sam believes in Roy. And so Sam goes on and gives Roy the ball. And they wanna get this kind of done and over with before the sun sets. So Sam gets down and he's the catcher. And we have Sam who's going on like, oh yeah, give him a shave, and and Max is like, ah, shut up, come on, like he's not gonna do anything. So the first ball goes in, strike one, and they're like, wait a minute, what? Like the whammer doesn't go on and like notice it coming. It's so fast, like he's just kind of like, what? So it kind of goes on to make them to quickly assess that they're getting tricked here or bamboozled or whatever. That there's no way that this guy has the heat the way he does, but god dang does he. So we even have Roy who's asking Sam if he's okay, and Sam is like, yeah, it's fine, I'm fine. So you know what would have been a really interesting thing if Sam would have gone on and eventually had uh like because of just those three balls, if Sam would have gone on and been either heavily injured or would have gone on to probably just die from those pitches, that would have been like, oh my god, like that would have also been the shock of that story. But we find that Sam is to go on and supposedly be this like raging alcoholic that were just to actually to probably state that like, well, yeah, like I'm sure probably the guy didn't even feel it or whatever just because of him just uh getting to alcohol. So we also have the whammer that's looking at Max, as now Max is kind of stepping back quite a bit of ways. And the whammer is like, well, hey man, how are you gonna call the strikes and everything very well? Max is like, no, I think I'm fine calling it from back here. Um, so now we have the whammer that if he wasn't really going on and paying no attention to Roy before, now he's really going on and getting really prepared. So another ball comes in, strike two, and now Whammer is pissed. And Whammer is like, he's giving me spitballs, or he's doing this, and we have Sam who's like, well, look at the ball. Like, do you see anything on it? Do you see any trickery on it? No. So Whammer's like, you better not be trying any funny business, kid. So we have Sam go back out there and hands Roy the ball. So we have Max that goes on to tell Whammer, it's like, hey, this is your last chance. For the guy who's supposed to be the best in the game, like, yeah, like, what happened? What happened to you? So we have Sam that's telling Roy, hey, don't wait up, or don't let up. Your Trido's waiting on here, boy. Come on. So Sam is telling Roy, one more, one more. So we, of course, go on to now have, if the Whammer was talking about how Roy was to be throwing spitballs, now we have the Whammer that is spitting in his own hands, getting ready for this one uh, more throw, and the Whammer kind of points his bat. So Roy goes on and throws this last pitch, and it ends up being strike three, striking out the greatest of the game. He's out. So here it goes on and looks at it, Roy, like, quite a bit of prospect here. So we get back into the train, and we have Roy who's running to try to catch it. All of a sudden, Roy is to turn to this kid who's asking for his name, and he says what his name is, and Roy ends up throwing this kid this ball, and the kid says thanks. Roy was also to be gathered around crowds and all just be like, yeah, you struck up the Whammer. Oh my god, who is this guy? Which I thought to just be rather fun. So we have Roy making his way back onto the train and meets up with Harriet Bird. What a bird she is. So we I kind of lost my train of thought here. Uh, I messed up. Uh, let me pause here for a second. So Max goes on and shows Sam the picture that he drew of Roy, who had gone on to strike out the Whammer, and 3 throws, 3 strikes, and eventually Max goes on and forgets about this whole picture, and eventually when Max goes on and is to remember who Roy is, eventually we'll go on to have Max bring back up this picture and goes on to put it into Roy's face. So Roy goes on, or Max goes on to ask Sam, it's like, well, hey, I want a full background of this boy, and I want everything by the morning. And so Sam is to go on, I'm like, well, I'm not really feeling all that well. And so Sam makes his way to leave, and Max is like, well, yeah, like, of course, like, this guy is not going to feel well because, of course, he's just a rummy and he's just drunk. So Harriet and Roy meet up with one another, and so they're talking, and Harriet is to go on and state how I'm sure people will be talking about this story for years to come, and she goes on and connects Roy's story to the stories of Lancelot, and is to talk about Homer, and the only thing that I know about Homer is like Odysseus and whatever that I learned from school. And if you probably don't know anything about Odysseus, then logically, maybe you've never heard of this story. But also, it seems that Roy was to not be very familiar with this story either. He's like, the only Homer that I know about is the one where uh, you hit the ball over the fence. Like, that's what kind of Roy goes into here. And so here it goes on and explains this story to Roy here. And we have Roy that is to go on and admit that he hopes that he'll go on and break every record of the books. And that he is to go on and want to walk down the street one day and have a person say, "Hey, that's Roy Hobbs. He's the best one in the game." And eventually Roy will go on and say that to Harriet right before he ends up getting shot. So, and Harriet is to go on and tell Roy, it's like, well, that's it? Like, that's your only goal in life? Like, don't you want anything more? Don't you want a girlfriend? And then Harriet goes on and puts her hand on uh, on Roy's thigh, and or maybe I think they end up kind of holding hands here. So Harriet goes on and tells Roy that he's priceless, and the next thing we end up going on and seeing is Roy and Sam kind of making their way through this train station, and then Roy goes to make his way to his hotel room, and Roy ends up getting a phone call, of course, from Harriet. Roy kind of doesn't quite know right away that it's Harriet calling, and so Harriet is to go on and remind Roy who she is, and it's like, well, yeah, like, because from a phone call, people just sound slightly tweakingly different. So Roy makes his way to Harriet's room and goes on to find Harriet in a very unusual garment, as she's to have almost this kind of unusual, almost wedding dress on, as she has this very black, like see-through uh, kind of thing going on upon her face, and also this very black dress. So as Roy enters, we have Harriet that says, "Roy, will you be the best there ever was in the game?" And we have Roy who's like, "Well, that's right." And that is, of course, when Harriet pulls out this gun and shoots Roy with a silver bullet. 16 years later, we have Pop who's going on and complaining about his New York Knights players who are not playing very well. They're the last in their division. Uh, they transition to Knights Field in New York. Pop is going on and complaining about how he should have gone on and been a farmer. His family was to urge him to go on and be a farmer, but he just didn't listen to him. So we have Pop that's complaining about his pitcher not throwing strikes, a pitcher named Fowler. Eventually, we'll come to find that Fowler, by the end of this movie, is going to quite possibly be a problem. And that is also a kind of very interesting foreshadowing bit of thing here. The very first pitcher we see here is going to go on and be a problem later on down the road. So they go on and uh, they start talking about how Fowler is like, oh, uh, he's just killing worms out there, and they're very upset that they're losing to the Pirates of all teams. So here's where we go on to have Pop, who takes a drink at this water fountain, and realize how the water fountain just like ugh. So we have Pop that goes on, complains to Red, the other manager here, like, well, hey, I thought, like, I told uh, the judge or whatever to get this fountain fixed, and Red is like, well, yeah, he said that he was gonna go on to fix it, and Pop's like, well, like, of course, like, yet another thing this guy doesn't give a about. So here's where Roy comes in, and he has a contract that is to be proof that he is to actually be a player here, that he's not just randomly coming in. And so both Bob and Red look this guy up and down. It's like, dude, this guy's a little bit too old to be here. And like they start poking him about his experience. And Hobbs also states that he's a right fielder, and they're like, well, we already have that position filled. So Roy has completely given up on being a pitcher and is now to go on and instead be a outfielder. We honestly don't know why Roy is to go on and to kind of give up pitching, but logically this guy has such a bat that logically not all sports teams would go on and have a guy like this who bats so well have him be a pitcher. It just doesn't quite make sense. So also supposedly a lot of the times, oddly enough, I found out when you're actually to not be good at baseball, you're to be put in the right field. So I was like, oh yeah, I was put in the right field. So yeah, I probably wasn't good at baseball. So that's kind of sad. The one year that I decided to play baseball, I was just stuck in the right field because they needed just somewhere for me to go. Um, but at least I got some playing time. At least I most of the time got walked. But anyways, so we have Pop that goes on and talk to Roy. It's like, hey, like you're starting to play ball at this age. You should be retired. And so they asked Roy where he had played, and he talks about the Oilers. And the funny thing of it is, when Roy goes on and talks to Red later on, as Red is to want to find out more about uh, Roy here, he asks him, it's like, well, hey, how long have you been playing for the Oilers? And Roy says, oh, a good 2 weeks. And Red is like, are you serious? It's like, yeah. And he's like, why hadn't you gone on to play baseball well before that? And Roy kind of just skirts it away to like, well, I have played. I've played in high school. And it's like, but yeah, but like, but no, like it doesn't quite make sense. But anyways, so, but also even when they ask about the Oilers, they're like, well, what team even is that? And it's a semi-pro team. It's like, okay, all right. So they go on and they tell Roy to make his way down to uh to get suited up because he does have a contract. So they're also just kind of upset that they give this guy $500 for him to play with them, and and so they just have so many problems with this guy coming in. But they tell him to go on and get suited up, and so Roy goes on and makes his way down to eventually get suited up, and they're contemplating what number to give him. And at first, it's like, well, hey, how about number 11? It's kind of a bad luck number. It's like, well, hey, how about 9? So they give him 9. And we have the guy that goes on and is suiting up the guys, and he notices this unusual case. And it's like, well, hey, what's the case? And Roy is like, well, it's my bat. And so they give him a locker, and so now we go on to, of course, have Bump come in, and he slicks his hair back, and Bump is to go on and say that he didn't want to go on and he didn't want to slide because, of course, he didn't want to break his cigar. So that kind of tells the level of care that this guy probably has. He's probably getting so much money playing baseball that he doesn't really give a about sliding or what is to probably be the best course of action for baseball. He probably cares more about how he's going to look, or like if his stogie is to go on and get damaged, rather than uh, him uh, playing the ball or playing ball the best way, the best course. So as Bump goes on and is saying all this to Max, we have Bump that is looking at Roy. It's like, oh, another victim, huh? So Roy and Bump introduce one another, Bump Bailey, and we have Bump that goes on to ask Roy, it's like, well, who are you? Are you going to be a new coach, new player? Like, who are you? Roy Hobbs. And we have Roy that goes on to explain that he's going to be an outfield. And so Bump is just like, outfielder? I don't think that's going to work out, but okay. So we have Red that turns to Hobbs as he's gone on to get suited up, and is to tell him, it's like, well, hey, you meet tomorrow, 6:30. We're gonna get something to eat, and we'll have a talk. So everybody is eyeballing and eye-effing Roy here, and they're like, man, another brilliant find from the scouting system. So we go on, we have the guy who suits everybody up and hands Roy this hat and tells him, welcome to the majors. So, like, there are some points in me where I didn't quite find every single cast member within this entire film. Like, there are obviously some points where I couldn't figure out who all the players were, even though there are certain players that do have some definitive, like, IMDb's and what have you, but, like, there was kind of a gap of figuring out who all these people were. Plus, also, like, I didn't want to have to take the time to memorize, like, 50 different names either. Uh, so forgive me if at some point, maybe there is to be a slight where I'm just like, this guy has this name, and maybe there are certain players that have the name of Diz or Boone or whichever, or John or whatever. But yeah, but I'm probably going to quickly forget about all those at some junctures of just this movie, because of just there being a lackluster bit of information out there for all these characters. Specifically, the guy who was to go on and suit people up. I have no idea what his name was. So let me know in the comments below if you definitively know this character's name. So we have Roy that goes on to make his way into his hotel, and here's where he meets up with this girl, Memo, that is probably going to ruin his life. Similar to Harriet. So both Roy and Harriet make their way into this elevator, and the elevator isn't moving. So Roy is like, we probably need to go on and actually hit a button here. So both Harriet and Roy leave the elevator, and I think it's funny how Pop immediately says, like, hey, are the two of you together? And it's like, no, 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 no. So Harriet goes on, or Memo. In some ways, Harriet and Memo are kind of the same because they're both to be these evilish like characters that have their own agendas, and they're honestly uh, Memo is to go on and not be probably as a bad person as Harriet, but like she's to go on and be manipulated by bad people and really doesn't want to go on and be a bad person. Like further and further we go along, we just find Memo that is just getting used to where she wants to go on and run away with Roy, and Roy is like, no, 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 no. Like I love baseball way too much to run away with you. Like regardless of how uh, the money that they could throw at this guy, like he's like, no, 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 no. Like that's not what I want. So, but anyways, Pop goes on and introduces Memo and Hobbs to one another, and Roy is to be set up as this new player, and and of course Memo goes on and asks Roy, it's like, well, what position are you playing in? And he's like, right field. It's like, that's Bump's position, isn't it? And Pop is like, well, yeah, we don't know what position he's actually going to play in if he plays in at all. Uh, so they have no idea what they're going to do with it. So Pop walks, of course, Memo to this cab, and here's where Red walks in and be like, hey, you want to eat like we had kind of put together here? So the two of them go. So they go to a restaurant that it seems that they can't go on and actually spell what the food is, but they say that the food is good. Red goes on and talks to Roy and starts asking him, it's like, well, hey, how long were you with the Oilers? And Roy goes on to state 2 weeks. And Red then asks, like, well, before that? And Roy's like, well, I've just kind of been knocked around from here and there. And the further and further Red starts to poke at Roy here, the more mysterious he ends up being with all the stuff that he says. To where Red is to go on like, well, like, are you upset about me asking all these questions about your life? And and Roy is like, no, 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 no. Like, I'll go on and I'll definitely answer it. But like, there really isn't nothing of this guy that can go on and really be a good enough answer to Roy's question or Red's questions. So and so Red is going on and consistently asking, like, well, why didn't you play when you were younger? And Roy is like, well, I did play when I was younger. I said high school. So we also come to find that Memo and Bump are off to the side. They're having their own little meal, and we kind of keep kind of lurking back at that. So Roy actually goes on to admit that he had gone on to disappear, but he always had a passion and the love of the game, and it was always on his mind to come back to it, and he wanted to give it another try. So Red is like, oh, just like that? And he's like, well, yeah, just like that. So we have Red that asks Roy where he's from, and Roy's like, well, does it really matter? God dang it, Roy is to be so mysterious. even to the point where people are to go on and ask him like, well, hey, are you from Nebraska? And Roy's like, that's not where I'm from. And starts to try to figure out or try to go on and get him to just say yes to anything. But so, but Red wants to go on and find out more about this player because Red realizes how important this is to Pop. How Pop is to go on and give his heart and soul to the game, and that at one point the game had trampled on him because of that. And Red is to state that he will do everything in his power to give Pop the pennant. And we have Roy that states, hey, it took me 16 years to get here. Like, I want to play. And you'll get the best out of me. Like, I promise you. Believe. And so Red is like, I believe you. I believe. But so they go on and they talk about the food and how they can't spell it. But at least it tastes pretty good. So and I've already kind of stated that, but I'm just kind of re-glossing over here. So we now have batting practice. And so Pop is to kind of like, okay, show some hustle, everybody get out there, start to go into batting practice. Roy gets his bat out, and Pop is like, hold on, Roy. Like, yeah, we're not going to use you. So you're going to just sit out. So Roy rides the bench, and both Red and both Pop are talking. It's like, well, hey, why aren't you going to go on and at least have him at batting practice? And Pop is like, yeah, like, you know what? Like, I don't really trust this guy, and also, like we didn't decide to get him. Like, if anything, like the owners and everything decided, so we're not going to use this guy. Like, we're just going to let him ride the pine. And they end up going on to not using this guy, and we continue to see the Knights lose over and over again. Balls are slipping out of their hands. Uh, Errors to be happening here and there. We have at one point where the pitcher goes on and throws the ball, and when the ball gets thrown back at him, his back is turned. So kind of some comedy here. The Knights blow to or the Knights bow to bees. So yeah, again, there is some kind of random teams that are to be used in this thing that aren't exactly major league teams. Cubs, Mall Knights, so on. So we see them losing, and this guy who goes on to make this speech comes in and is to say that losing is like a disease. And so he goes on and says every disease is to be as contagious as polio or as contagious as this and da 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 da. And so he goes on to talk about how every single disease in the book is to exist, but eventually there is to also go on and be a cure for every disease. And so eventually, the more and more they hear this, like, Roy just gets so effing fed up that he just starts to walk off because he's not playing. And also, he's like, why do I need to, like, be hypnotized by this speech if I'm not even playing? Like, this isn't even worth it to me to be here because I know I'm going to go on and I'm going to knock it off I'm going to knock the cover off the ball once they give me an effing shot. So Roy walks away and Pops tries to stop him. Like, hey, you want to sit down and pay attention? And we have Roy that just continues to walk away without answering. And so, uh, also, it was kind of interesting how this building has immediately what I popped for is on the scoreboard. It says Sears and Roebuck. I'm like, you sons of like, we meet again, Sears and Roebuck. Yeah, I've had a very longevous career with Sears, believe you me. And yeah, like immediately when I saw that, I'm like, of course. Some bit of dialogue that I have to go on and bring up about this effing company. But luckily, it no longer exists. The Roebuck still exists, though, because of course it does. Because that was a secondary company to Sears. So yeah, so that still exists, but Sears doesn't. Um, it still exists through old movies and I'm sure through probably a mom and pop company somewhere. Like I'm still sure that there's probably some um, inkling of its existence some effing where, and I hope it dies. In my opinion. Um, but also, it's kind of interesting how eventually, when it was to be partnered up with Kmart, eventually Kmart started dying as well. I think there still is one that exists out there somewhere within the state of which that I live in. But I think that's simply because it was like a mom and pop kind of owned thing. But anyways, uh, just a bit of history of a company that no longer would have. Probably a lot of people give a shit about this, but I was like, oh, we meet again, Sears. You son of a bitch. So, uh, so as another game is to end and Hobbs is to, of course, not get used, we have Pop that ends up getting upset with Roy simply because he no longer has a care of what's really going on. Because how could he? This guy is just uh freaking uh getting more sitting time than hitting time. So why wouldn't he be miserable? So we have Pop that is telling Roy, hey, you know what, I'm gonna send you down back to Class P ball and you're gonna go to the Great Lakes Association and this and that. And we have Roy that tells Pop, it's like, well, hey, you make the rules. And Papa's like, yeah, that's right. And you need to start playing by them. And Roy's like, well, I've been playing by them. Like, I just haven't been playing. So Pop tells Roy, it's like, well, hey, like you signed a contract, remember? Like you signed a contract with us. And yeah, Roy is like, yeah, to play baseball. Not to be forced to fall asleep to the repetitive drones of a hypnotist. And like, I won't allow that. I won't do it. I just won't put up with it. And so we have Roy that states to Pop, it's like, hey, it took me a long time to get here. And like, I came here to play baseball. And so as Hobbs wakes off or walks off, Pop chases after him. And Pop says, like, okay, like, you know what, if you're really passionate about this, then batting practice tomorrow. And we'll finally see, like, maybe, like, this guy has honestly lost his magic for how much time he's been sitting on the pine. And maybe he is to not be as well, uh, to do just because he's been sitting on the bench for so long. But Hobbs turns to Pop. It's like, well, hey, like I've been at batting practice every day. It's just you haven't been using me. So they have Bump who's going on, and he's in the batting cage and he's swinging away. Uh, we would of course go on to have Memo, who's in the crowd. She's in the seats where no one's there because batting practice. So Red tells Hobbs like, "Hey, you all squared away and get in the cage and just kind of get ready." So we of course go on to have Hobbs, who starts cranking them away. They're smacking to the bleachers, every single one of them. It seems that every time Roy gets up to bat, there is always just some miraculous strike of lightning that always just occurs. I don't know what is with this guy that has to go on and just consistently have lightning just appear everywhere that occurs within him. Of this being some connection with this character and lightning occurring. And it is kind of funny how like we even have a bit of clouds in the sky. But so they go on to see Roy crank it to the cheap seats. And so Fowler is like, "All right, Grandpa, like let's see if you can hit this one." And he of course goes on and hits it to the cheap seats. So Pop is going on and taking a big swig of that water fountain that I'm sure is still broken and still doesn't have good water in it, but it's like, well, maybe he's gonna get used to it at this point. So, whoop, god dang it, let me pause here for a second. Yeah, like I really want to go on and to assume that I wouldn't actually have to deal with any like text. That's why I try to tend to do these things so late at night. So I definitely wasn't gonna go on and get any kind of text of any kind. But yeah, like I get freaking spam things all the time. This political bullshit, regardless of like, no matter how many times I block something, something else just pops up to where I'm just like, seriously, because it's political time. That everybody has their own agendas that they kind of have to randomly robocall people and robo text people, and it's unavoidable to not get these notifications. It seems, but maybe I should go on and definitely insert some apps so I can kind of stop getting these like robo texts and robo calls from all these effing people. But anyways, back to the film, and if this eventually pops up again during this review, I'm definitely gonna go on and figure out a way to just cut my notifications completely off. Because I even have like a do not disturb thing on there to where like it won't give me any notifications of any kind, but still, like I'll get the text notifications. So I apologize. But anyways, back to the film. We have Pop that goes on to ask for Roy's bat, assuming that it is to probably not to be a bat that probably doesn't have either cork in it or has some kind of issue with it. Pop goes on to eye this bat, and it's like, all right, well, Roy, like, where'd you get this bat? And Roy is to state that he had gone on and made the bat and talked about his story. And so Pop goes on to tell Roy, hey, well, if this bat goes on and stands up to major league qualifications, then we'll allow you to use it. Uh, and so they have to weigh and measure the bat to make sure that like there's no trickery going on here. So we have Pop who's to kind of eye up Roy as like, well, he's still old, and Renner's like, well, hey, it's better late than never. And And so Pop turns to Red. It's like, well, yeah, but this is just practice. We'll see. So we now go on to get to our regularly scheduled baseball game with a long losing streak. So we have Gus and we have Memo in the crowd going on to seemingly watch. What, of course, to be eventually us finding out that Bump is to, I think, try and throw a little bit of a wrench into the game, as Bump is just performing very, very poorly here. And when Bump goes on to make his way to speak to Pop as he makes his way back to the dugout, Pop asks Bump, it's like, well, hey, why is it that you didn't go on and catch that ball? And Bump says, like, well, the sun got in my eyes. And Pop is looking into the sky. There's not a bit of a sun that's in the sky as it is to be so cloudy. And Pop is like, yeah, the sun is just so blinding. So I thought that was hilarious. So it gets to the point where Bump is having such a poor performance in this game that Pop gets so upset with Bump. It was like, hey man, like you need to start performing, or we're gonna go on and replace you with Hobbs because he's gonna have a pretty good goddamn bat. So, uh, so the two of them get upset with one another, and the umpire cries out to the Knights like, well, hey, I need another hitter here. So we have Bump that rides the bench for a little bit here, and Roy finally gets his chance. And so, like, okay, we'll see what he's got. So Roy goes up there, and the next thing we end up seeing is the pitcher going on to throw strike one, and then they're like, oh, maybe he wasn't so good after all. And then the next thing we see is a swing, and the cover gets knocked off the ball, and the ball ends up in a billion things of yarn and falls into the outfield somewhere to where nobody can go on and really grab this ball that well and figure out what to do with it. So people are going on and running the bases for the Knights, and eventually we go on to have the guys throw the ball around to get to then Roy kind of sliding into his certain base to be safe. The Phillies go on to, or I think the Rillies. The Rillies is that the name of the team? That's what it looks like. It says here. No, wait, it is the Phillies, but it's kind of an interesting logo. Uh, it almost looks like the Rillies. Anyways, so the opposition team goes on and speaks with the umpire, like, well, hey, that's not the ball. Like, where's the ball? And so they go on and they have the cover and they have the ball of yarn. And so, like, the guys are very upset, obviously. And we have Roy, and he's looking out in the stands. We have Gus, who's kind of tipping his hat to Roy, like, hey, yeah, I'm looking at you, kid. So Roy goes on to be at the third base, and it seems the opposition goes on, the opposite team goes and is to be uh, celebrating their win. So, but the story of this is that Roy had gone on to knock the cover off the ball. So the Knights are going on and walking back to uh, their their locker room, and everybody is going on and talking about, like, hey, where'd you get this Roy guy? And Pop is going on and saying it's like, well, that's the way to grease them uh, with a mystery to get people intrigued in this new player. So uh, they go on and they talk about the bat and ask about it. So asking where they found Roy, and it's like, well, obviously a scout found him. So they also talk about how Roy is to be so seasoned, and really, for Pop, it's like, well, hey, he's young enough to me. Like, if he can play, then who cares what age he is? So now we have the judge who's kind of going on to want to sink his claws into Roy and figure out a way to manipulate him. So the next thing we see is Roy's talking with Bobby, who's the Bat Boy. Bobby does quite a bit of fun here. There's one thing where he goes on and he's like putting a finger in his mouth and he's like blowing, and then all of a sudden his hat kind of lifts from off of his head, and that kind of is a funny trick. And he's like, "Oh, I blew too hard." So Bobby is speaking with Roy here, and Bobby brings up about the bat, about how we got it, and Roy's like, "Well, I made it, and if anything, if you go on, you find a really fine piece of lumber, maybe you can go on and make a bat uh, yourself. And if anything, also, like, I'll go on and I'll even help you make the bat. We can work at this together." And I'm kind of curious if that is to go on and actually be the Savoy bat that ends up getting used by the end of this film is to actually be Bobby's bat. That would actually have been interesting to find out that bit of information, but they never say it. So we have Max that is to go on and be drawing a picture about the baseball getting knocked the cover off of. And as Roy walks by, Max chases after him. It's like, you know what? Like, you look so familiar to me. Like, do you remember me? And Roy is like, nope, don't remember you at all. So Max is to ask, like, well, hey, can I buy you a beer? And Roy is like, nope. So Max wants nothing, or Roy wants nothing to do with Max. And uh, so Max is like, well, yeah, I'll definitely see you around. Like, there's something just about you. Just like my memory's not that good, but I just there's something there. So we now make our way to Chicago. So Glenn Close here is to be Iris here, making her way into uh, this candy shop where it has sodas and all kinds of things. It ends up saying Parkside Candy. I'm trying to see what the actual Parkside Candy Shop because the name is a little bit so small in print and what have you. So we have Iris that goes on and meets up with Al, and they go on and they ask about their weekend. I feel that Iris goes into the shop quite often, and she asks for a cup of coffee. So as Iris goes on and is to find out about the whole Wonder Boy thing and the name of the bat, and is to also go on and find out about Roy Hobbs via this newspaper. And then we go on to have this movie that is to go on and be done about Roy, how the weights and measurements are to be done of Roy's bat, and it seems to fit the major league qualifications, so they're going to allow this bat to legally be used by Roy, of course. And they make it a whole hullabaloo about it. So we have Pop that brings Bump in and tells him he needs to start shaping up. Or otherwise, they'll be happy to have him sit the bench. So we now have Bump, who's going on to probably play his definitive very last game for the rest of his life. Bump goes on to try to do his best to make all these good catches, and one of the catches has him go through a wall. Going through a wall through the back of his head and killing him on impact. Wildly enough, I made the joke in my mind as this was transpiring in the movie to be like, and he's dead. And then shortly thereafter, like, yeah, we're gonna honor Bump Bailey as he's passed away. I'm like, what? Like, I was just making a joke in my mind about this guy being dead. And yeah, transpiring within the movie, the guy is to go on and die here. And in all honesty, also, the guy who plays Bump in this movie is to actually be the actor Madison. And I had probably not gone on and done anything to honor him either when he passed away. But I obviously am to go on and know this guy from a number of different films, like, of course, Species, and also, like, there was a show called Power or Powers that he was involved in kind of like the later seasons. And also, there's just a number of projects like this one that he was actually to be a really interesting character in, like Reservoir Dogs. But yeah, so weirdly enough, we have probably so many people who have done great roles in our time. But anyways, so as Bump is to have crashed his way through this wall, we have a number of players running to Bump, and there is to be a call out that Bump is to be seriously hurt, and then the next thing we see is fond farewell for Bump Bailey funeral at Knights Field. They go on and they have a plane fly by. A number of the players of Knights are all thrusting their hats to their hearts, and they're going on to honor a fallen comrade uh, in the battlefield of baseball. They end up having a memorial of Bump Bailey, and they end up playing ball. So here's where we go on. We have Knight, Roy Hobbs going on into the plate. And so we would, of course, have Hobbs that goes on and hits this home run with incredible power. And they expect good things for Roy Hobbs. And we, of course, have Mike, or Max. I mean, not Mike, Max. It's like, God, like, this guy is just so strange. And he's trying to figure out exactly, like, where do I know this guy from? So Here's where Roy goes on and is to have his bat out. And we have one of the players who I believe is John here that looks at the bat and is like, you know what? Like that lightning strike thing, like it kind of reminds me of one of these old shows called the Squadron um, Signias. And they used to wear this like lightning bolt patch. And so we have who I believe is John going and adjusting his uniform to have this lightning bolt on his arm. And we of course go on. Oh yeah, his name is Olsen. So yeah, his name is John Olsen. So he goes up to the batting cage and or batting practice, and he starts to swing the ball. And all of a sudden, he just starts hitting the ball really well, and everybody's like, "Oh, John actually hits the ball for once." And then he just continues to, and they're like, "Hey, maybe there is something here." So the next thing we see is every single one of the players all have this lightning strap to their arm, and they all have their hats to their hearts, and like so. Yeah, so they're like, "Hey, maybe this is gonna go on and kind of bring us good luck here." So the newspaper has changed to now saying that the Knights are on a hot streak, and the Knights get 12 hits, and so on and so forth, winning 4-0. And we see the newspaper where it seems that Roy is leading the charge of the Knights team winning, and so on and so forth. Everybody is so happy and excited, and I'm sure maybe somebody's a little bit too excited. They go on and they're printing basically money here by baseball cards, and Roy is to go on and be on the cover of Magazine of Life, and so Max is to just be so baffled how Roy is to go on and whatever thing that Roy needs, if he needs a single, if he needs a double, if he needs a triple, if he needs a home run, Roy can get any number of these things. And Max just finds it to just be so, like, he's never seen anything like it, and it's incredible. And so, and that this guy just came out of nowhere. So the next thing we see is Iris in the movie theater, and she is watching Roy go on and talk to all these kids, and they're asking, it's like, well, hey, like, how can I become a great baseball player like you? And he's like, well, you just need to try really hard. And so, even to the point to where Roy, when he sees the one girl there out of all the boys, Roy goes on and specifically turns to the one girl, and it's to specifically talk to her, because it's like, yeah, like, hey, like, just because you're a girl, I'm not gonna single you out and forget that you're here. Like, no, like, he's going on and looking at everybody and just being like, hey, like, what's your name? So as Red and as Roy here, they're getting their shoe shines going. We have Red that turns to Roy and is to tell Roy here about what is to be financially happening with this team, explaining that the team really does have to go on and win the pennant this year, and probably just win it all, because the whole thing of it here is that last season they had some financial problems, and that the judge has 10% of the shares, and 10% of the shares? That doesn't quite make sense. Uh, yeah. Last season, the team had gotten into some financial problems. Uh, the Judge is to be a majority shareholder of the Knights, and there is to go on to be one condition on the contract uh, if they can win the pennant this season, then uh, then the Judge is out. But if they lose, then uh, they have to sell the team. So it's basically the whole thing that breaks down is it's like a winner take all scenario, and like it's all for nothing, so they have to win. So here's where we get a scene that kind of really doesn't mean a whole lick of anything. Uh, Both Pop and Red are going on and doing some whistling, and they're talking about these just certain songs and what have you. And then there seems to be one batter that goes on since Hobbs is the only one left out on the field making his way to the pitcher mound. A batter is to tell Hobbs, hey, just lay one in. Come on. Like, so Roy is to honestly kind of be hesitant about doing this, and Max is in the seats kind of watching this happen. So Roy goes on and gets the windup as he's getting egged on by a lot of the teams. They're like, hey, just go on and just strike him out. So Roy goes on, throws the pitch, and the fastball is to go ever so quickly that it breaks the netting of uh, of this batting cage or this batting net. So after that happens and how people are going, I'm like, wow, he really burnt that in. We then have Max that disappears, and the next thing we see is Roy now making his way into talking with Pop. Pop tells Roy that the Judge needs to speak with him, and Pop asks Roy, it's like, well, hey, do you want me to go with you? And Roy is like, no, I think I can handle it. I think it'll be fine. And so Roy makes his way to speak with the Judge. So oddly, we come to find that the Judge is to seemingly be living in existence in a very dark room. The Judge goes on to explain why this is to have occurred because as a kid he was to be afraid of the dark. And so Judge decided to want to face his fear by being consistent darkness to the point where now when he is in the darkness, he realizes how well he could see, that you don't need the light to see. And there's a lot of kind of back and forth between both Judge and both Roy here that is just kind of a bit of interesting dialogue that's kind of exchanged back and forth. How Roy and Hobbs just kind of say it's like, well, hey, when you're in the darkness, like you can and can't really see somebody for who they are. And like we can also go on and say that the Judge needs to also be in darkness for how supposedly evil he can possibly be. And so yeah, so the evil or the corrupt can have to live in existence in the darkness. But anyways, so as the two of them are going on and they're talking here, here's where money starts to come into play. And the Judge is to ask Roy, it's like, well, hey, like we should definitely be giving you more money, right? Um, because like you're doing so well. And Roy's like, well, only if you think that it's fitting. And and this guy is like, no, like you should really go on and be asking for more money here. So the further and further they have this bit of dialogue, we realize how not so easily swayed that Roy is. And so we then, after the fact, have both Gus and both Judge talking about, like, well, yeah, like, he's not gonna be bought off like Bump was. So if anything, like, we need a much different tactic here to go after this guy. So we have Max that bumps back into Roy here, and we have Max who figures out who Roy is. And Max confronts Roy like, well, hey, you were trying to hide, and you were to try to be much more of a riddle. And Roy's like, dude, I have nothing to hide. Nothing at all. And so we have Max that states to Roy, it's like, well, yeah, Sam Simpson died before he gave me a lowdown on you. But Max does go on and thrust into Roy's face that picture of Roy and the Whammer. And it's like, aha, like I figured you out. So Max is going on and saying that Roy seems to have a number of different stories floating around, that he joined the circus at some point, or and there's always these cockamamie crazy stories uh, that said Roy killed somebody, and Roy tells Max, is like, well, hey, people can believe whatever they want. And Max is like, well, hey, once you get to know me, you're gonna like me. And Roy's like, sure. So the next thing we see is Roy making his way uh, to this fancy uh, dancing room where he goes on to kind of side by side go with Max to make their way to meet up with both Gus and both Memo. So eventually we find out that Gus seems to have this magic eye for things, and we have Roy who goes on like, oh, you have a magic eye for things now, do you? So we find that Gus is to be this guy who is to be placing bets, and he has even gone as far enough to place specific bets on Roy. And Roy's like, oh, you can go on and place a bet on a very specific person? And Gus is like, well, yeah, you can. So at some point, Gus had put a lot of money just on 3 pitches. So here's the trick that we get here. So Gus says that he has a magic eye, and he says that Roy probably has $10 in his wallet, and goes on to say, it's like, well, hey, yeah, I bet you $100, or I bet you $1,000. And Roy is like, hey, I probably don't have that kind of money, so if anything, let's just say that it's 100. So they're like, okay. So Gus says that he only has $10 in his pocket, so Roy takes that deal, and at first he goes on and he whips out $8 and then 37 cents, and so it's like, okay, how exactly does that add up to $10? I don't quite get that. But then it's also kind of funny about how Gus is like, man, am I good? And then all of a sudden, we then have Roy, who's to pull off his own magic trick, as he would then turn to Gus like, well, I guess I owe you $100 then. And Gus is like, well, hey, maybe you'll just owe me a favor in the future. And Roy doesn't want to owe any favors to anybody. So Roy goes on to pull some coins out of Memo's ear, and Roy says to Gus, is like, well, it looks like you overlooked something. And then he turns to Memo, it's like, all right, like, do you want to dance? So the two of them go on the dance, and so Gus is to turn to Max, like, hey, like, get as much information as you can on this guy. And so the next thing we see is Gus and both Memo are by the beach, and uh, really a lot of here is to kind of be lost on me. Uh, and really, eventually, all this leads to the two of them getting together, and Memo just really calling Roy a mystery here. So Memo goes on and talks about how she had gotten set up with Bump, and how Memo is not really waiting for true love to come along, and so on. And so there's just a lot of stuff kind of going on here. But Memo goes on to state that Roy is not like all the other guys, because of course he's not, and that's where she can go on and like Roy because he has like a good moral center. And so the next thing we see is both Roy and both Memo together, and we have Pop that is to spot Roy and wants to kind of pull him aside, and is to kind of state like, well, yeah, like if anything, Memo, like, you know what, I love her, but she's also really bad luck, and she'll probably rub that off on you. And so Roy's like, well, I'll definitely consider that. But we then go on to have Roy, who's starting to strike out. He's starting to become a disappointment, and we see that through the newspapers. And Roy is to end up much more with Memo here, going into his bed, going on and having Memo touch Roy on his chest that seemed to be very scarred, of course, because of his wound, his injury from his past. Uh, the Knights go into a heavy amount of slump, losing 5-1, so on and so forth, as both Roy and both Memo are having some drinks together. So Roy and Memo are to be very smitten with one another. She used to say how she misses him and so on and so forth, as Roy is to continue to miss balls and get strikes. So even to the point to where both Memo and Roy are sharing a bit of newspaper together. So Roy at some point is to be getting flashbacks to Harriet as he wakes up in the night, and that's where he gets touched by the scar by Memo. So we get to a point where things are going so bad for the team that Pop ends up getting upset just about a call that ends up happening from an umpire as the night slump continues. So the kind of turning point here is Iris goes on and starts reading the newspaper, and she goes on to find out that the Knights are in town. They're in Chicago. So Iris goes on and gets a ticket to go to the game, as of course she does. So we have Roy that eventually goes on and is to make his way up to bat, and we go on to have him bizarrely this day decide to look up out the crowd. There was just something that just struck him as needing to just look out in the crowd. And we have Iris that goes on and stands up for way too long to where everybody is trying to tell her to sit down. As we go on to then have Roy, who's to actually look up at the crowd and see Iris, he realizes that she's in the crowd, and he then goes up to bat and hits the ball so much so that it crashes into this clock. So after Roy goes on and hits the run of which that he does, he starts to make his way closer to the seats, and then he's getting blinded by all these cameras. So Hobbs tries to use his cap to figure out a way to unblind himself to see if actually Iris was in the stands. After the game is all over with, we get a note passed to Roy talking about how a nice lady had given him this note. So Roy reads the note and follows it to this candy shop. So as Roy makes his way to this candy shop, uh, both Roy and Iris meet here, and they kind of do a bit of a catch up where it's like, well, hey, are you married? No. Like, why aren't you married? I don't know. So and eventually they go on and they ask like, well, hey, you look different. Yeah, you look a lot different. And back and forth the way they go here. So we have Iris and we have Roy that feel that there is always a presence of them to where if they were to turn around uh, that they would just magically appear. That Roy would always look in the crowd, assuming that Iris was going to be there, or Iris was to always think uh, that she was going to go on and just have Roy disappear one day in front of her. And I think Roy also goes on and talks about how like he thought that he saw her uh, at the train station one day. But anyways, so uh, they go on, and here is where, of course, we have Iris that says like, "Well, I've got to go," and she gets into this cab, and we have Roy go on and ask her. It's like, "Well, hey, do you work?" And Iris is like, "Well, yeah." And so he's like, "Are you gonna come to the game tomorrow?" And she's like, "I don't know, I got work." And he's like, "Well, come to the game." So here is where uh, Roy gets his groove back, and as Roy is to go on and get a call from Memo, it doesn't seem like he cuts it to the quick about like, well, hey, I've moved on. I fancied a new girl, Memo. No, it seems that Roy is to go on and still talk to Memo as if like if as if she's still his girl, but like there is kind of like a tone that Roy goes into where it's just kind of like it's very uh kind of obviously having Roy think that this girl isn't as important to him. But so as Roy hangs up the phone, we have Memo that fakes the words "I love you," and Gus is to go on and ask Memo. It's like, well, you have him under your control, right? So uh we start to see that Roy is doing better, that he's swinging for the fences, and everything is to go on and coming up Millhouse. As we have Roy that again meets up with Iris, and Roy is glad that Iris had made her way to the game, and so the two of them go on and they start talking, and Roy explains every bit of what happened to him after he had left Iris and gone on this train and got shot, and how he was in the hospital for a very long time. And he goes on to explain every bit of everything, but he kind of half says all of it. So we kind of get this quick explanation, kind of here and there of certain words, of what actually did happen to Roy, but it's very kind of rushly explained as I'm going on and rushly explaining it anyways. So Roy is to go on and state that he had to have, at one point, probably after he got shot, completely lost his confidence, and that there is no way going back to the major leagues after getting shot the way he did. So Roy and Iris make their way to Iris's place, and through the conversation between the two of them after they are to back and forth be like, well, hey, should you make coffee or should you make tea or something, like whatever is the most convenient, and then like there's the back and forth about it's a whole hullabaloo. So we get to the more important part where Roy goes on and notices this ball and glove, and it's like, well, hey, who's to be the owner of this? And we have Iris that goes on to explain, yeah, those are my sons. And Iris explains to Roy, it's like, well, yeah, like my son is actually a real big fan of you, so like my son probably won't believe that you were here, because of course her son is not. So we have Roy that tells Iris like, well, hey, I'd like to meet him, and we have Iris that explains like, well, yeah, my son is coming home pretty soon, and we have Roy that asks Iris like, well, hey, like, is he with his father? And Iris is like, no, like his father lives in New York. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge. Cause yeah, his father does live in New York. He plays for them. So, uh, we have Iris that states that her son needs his father, and Roy is like, well, yeah, father makes all the difference. And so we have Iris that goes on to tell Roy, it's like, well, hey, you need to catch your train. You better go. So she doesn't say you gotta go. She says you better go. So Roy realizes that this is true, and there's a really interesting moment when he actually does leave for Boston. He is outside just kind of waiting because he doesn't really want to leave. And Iris is to poke her head out the window and notice him doing this. And that's when the two of them realize that there's something there between the two of them. So back to the games here. We're starting to see a bit of success. We're starting to go on and see guys kind of playing around in the train, uh, throwing around peanuts and so on and so forth. Here's where we get where Bobby goes on and does a little trick where he blows his, and then the hat pops up, and they all have a bit of a joke at Bobby's expense because it's funny. So there is speculation between Gus and Memo and I believe all the bad guys within this movie are like, well, hey, yeah, like Hobbs is kind of unpredictable, but he probably won't make up the difference for them to exactly win. And also, they're going to start throwing wrenches into the team also, because eventually we'll find that Memo is going to end up with Fowler, who is the pitcher, and he'll be the pitcher for the seemingly last game. And so yeah, so if they don't have their hooks into one person, they'll find their hooks into another. So everybody is going on and busting out the champagne, and everybody's getting boozed up and alcoholed, and Pop is to start to get upset of like, hey, it's too early for this. Like, put away that booze. Like, don't celebrate just yet. And we have Roy that goes on, and he ends up having to make a phone call to try to call Iris, and there is no response. So we have Max that is going on, and he gets a phone call. And Max ends up going on to need to God, what is this? Um, he's going on and he's picking somebody up. I have no idea. So we have Roy that goes on and meets up again with Memo at this party, and Memo is wearing this fancy dress, but she is going on to be offered up to Fowler. As Fowler goes on and turns to Roy, it's like, "Hey, old man, don't wait up, Grandpa." So Roy is to go on and be at this party, and Gus meets up with Roy. Hey, some spread, right? Uh, some fresh food, and so like you would honestly think that Gus would probably go out of his way to like spoil food poison all of his players, because that would just be a really crappy tactic just to definitively make them lose. But so the thing that I didn't quite get here is at one point we would have a Memo that gives Roy this bit of food, and then shortly thereafter he goes on to drop down and start to feel ill. I'm like, well, what did they do to him? But I guess it's just a mere coincidence. But so also, Gus is forcing Roy here uh, to think of his future and to try and pay him off, and Roy has no interest in it. So, realizing that there's no way to buy this guy, that they have to go on and realize that they've misjudged Roy, and that Gus is to just kind of feel very disappointed here. So, here is where we go on to have everybody playing the piano, and Roy starts to feel ill and he starts to sink. We have Roy that starts to ask, because of how like ill he is, about, hey guys, you guys need to go on, you need to find Pop. And they're like, Pop, are you crazy? Like, no, like, let's go on and let's take you to the hospital. And we have Boone that is to kind of tell everybody, hey, Boone is one of the players here, one of the Knights players. He's like, all right, let's get out of here and let's get him to a hospital. So they end up slapping a bit of newspaper that goes on to state that Hobbs is in the hospital. So they go on and they give Hobbs this newspaper stating that the Knights have started to lose again. And it's interestingly enough that Hobbs is in the same room where all these pregnant women are. And eventually, the Knights guys, as they meet up with Hobbs, make the joke that that Hobbs was like expecting. Uh, so I thought that that was kind of funny. But we'll come to find out that Roy is to have had some kind of bun in the oven, and that bun is going to end up being a bullet of all things. So the doctor ends up handing Roy this silver bullet that is to have kind of eat away at his stomach for a very long time. And the doctor ends up explaining to Roy that Roy needs to completely stop playing baseball or he will die. If Roy goes on and stops playing baseball right here and now, he will probably go on and be able to heal with his injury and be able to live a happy and fulfilled life. But if he continues to play baseball, he could die. Probably. So, Roy, of course, will be stubbornly adamant about playing baseball, regardless of him possibly having to questionably die. But, anyways, so we end up having Iris find out about Roy uh, being at the hospital, and so eventually Iris will go on and make her way to try to get to Roy at the hospital to talk to him. But Memo will get there first. So Memo goes on and talks to Roy, and she tells him that the two of them should just run away together because she knows that Roy is going to go on to play baseball again, regardless of the doctor's orders, or Roy stating it's like, oh no, like the doctors are just kind of really playing up my my injury. I'm fine. So Memo goes on to tell Roy that, like, well, hey, like, how about the two of us run away together? Like, Gus will give us more than enough money that we can just disappear. And Roy is like, no. Like, I'm not going to run away with you. It's not going to happen. Like, I'm going to play this game. And Memo just keeps going on to just say, it's like, well, hey, like, all it is just one last game. So, like, why can't you just walk away? And so the more and more Gus is to try and let me pause here for a second. The more Roy realizes he's kind of being tricked here, and he's being pushed into retirement, the more that he struggles against it. Even so much so that Roy goes on to have this kind of secret practice, just like, well, hey, like I've kind of been away from baseball. I just kind of want a couple of different practice swings to see if I still got it. So Roy goes on and does this practice, and Max secretly off to the side has his own camera out just to cover this, so he can just continue to make money off of Roy by having the story be done. So they throw a ball to Roy, and Roy starts going on and perfectly hitting exactly where Max is, breaking Max's camera, and Roy says to Max, like, hey, you got that, Max? Don't ever look back, Max. Ever. So Max just continues to get pelted with these balls perfectly thrown at him. And then eventually Roy falls down to the ground. And Roy tells the rest of the guys, hey, like, no one must know. Like, let's go on and let's try to hide this, and I probably will be able to kind of play the game. I think we'll be fine. And they're saying like, dude, you need to just go back to the hospital. And the judge is kind of looking like, ah. So the judge goes on and makes his way to Roy here, and he gives him like 20 grand, double what he probably should have gone on and offered him. And the judge says, like, well, yeah, you can't play. Like, if anything, like, if you go on and get involved in this game, like, you're very unpredictable and you can do something very unexpected. Like, even if you go out there and you just have one at bat, like, we just can't allow it, because again, like, he can go on and win the game, as well as also, like, the judge has a lot riding on this team losing this specific game. So the judge hands Roy $20, expecting him to take this offer. And eventually, Roy will throw this money back at the judge and be like, no, I'm not taking your deal. You forgot this bit of money, uh, and I'll give it back to you. So the book is to go on and state that Hobbs does actually go on and take the money in the book. And it is kind of to go on and be interesting, that little twist there. But Judge also thrusts into Roy's face the pictures of him getting shot, as well as also they were to go on and find that Harriet had also been killed as well, that she had done herself in. And we have the judge that goes on to tell Roy, it's like, well, hey, we can kind of spin this story in any number of ways to say that you killed this woman, and like, even if you did not go on and actually do this, well, like, what would your fans think if finding out about this story? So Judge is even trying to go on and figuring out a way to blackmail Roy, but Roy eventually will still go on and be like, let it ride. Tell this story. And so, if anything, actually, if Roy did actually kill this woman, it would probably be from self defense. for how she shot first. It's the Han Solo kind of debate of who shot first. And we still have that issue to this day, even though Han Solo would have answered that question a billion different times in a billion different interviews. And also, he would slap a shirt on his own self that says, I shot first. We still have people like, well, who shot first? Anyways, so I guess you would also have to pause the movie just right to see who in the film shot first, and then just say that that's your answer. Like, which gun did they show first? But anyways, that would be your definitive answer. So here's where the team goes on, and it's to be around Hobbs here, and they give him this like get well card and so on and so forth, and then they leave. So here's where Iris makes her way into the hospital, and Max starts walking by, seeing Iris, and is to hand Iris these photos of Harriet in this story, and is hoping that he can get some love triangle or some kind of story out of this. And Iris will give Max this statement, which Iris won't at all. Really just going on to have Iris thrust back these photos and walk away. So Roy tells Iris that he is probably going to end up being forced to quit baseball, and Iris asks why. And Roy goes on to talk about his past mistakes and that they're still haunting him to this day. And he stated that he didn't even know her, and it was just some girl on the train. And Iris says, like, well, you liked her, didn't you? And he's like, yes, but I didn't see it coming. And Iris says, like, well, hey, you were young then. People can be allowed to make mistakes. So Roy is like, I wish things could have turned out so differently. And then he goes on to talk about how for 16 years he lived with the idea that he wanted to be the best of the game, that he wanted people to go on and say, hey, that's Roy Hobbs. He's the best in the game. And so, yeah, so that he wanted to break every record in the book. The same thing that he'd gone on to say to Harriet at one point before she shot him. So Roy goes on to state this, and we then have Roy who's to ask Iris why exactly, when he went to Chicago, did Iris stand up the way she did. And Iris was to say, it's like, well, I didn't want to see you fail. And Roy is like, well, I wish my dad could have seen, or could have, and then he stops. And Roy says, God, I love baseball. And Roy asks Iris, like, well, are you coming to the game tomorrow? And she's like, yeah, I'm going to come to the game. And he's like, all right. So Iris is going to go on and bring her son with her to the game. And eventually, everything gets interrupted by this effing nurse who's like, hey, I'm going to prop these things down. And we again have the I Gotta Go by Iris. So the next thing we see is the chalk being put onto this field, the bases getting put together, and they go on to scratch out Hobbs' name and put another one in its place. So here is where we have the judge, we have Gus, and we have Memo, who are all in this room. And here is where Roy slaps down the 20 grand. It's like, hey, you forgot something. And he's like, I'm not gonna go on and do what you want me to do. And we even get to a point to where Memo goes on and whips out this gun, and then she puts it to Roy's face. Because, in all honesty, with Roy not going along with this, Memo realizes that Roy is not going to end up with Memo. That at this point, this ship has sailed. So Memo calls Roy a bastard, as Roy is to want to let things ride. And Memo says to Roy that she hates him. And Roy is to turn to Memo. It's like, you were right, Memo. We have met before. And there is probably a very good reason why Roy had gone on in his dreams and had got a flash of Harriet, and then he woke up to Memo, because Roy had gone on to realize that Memo and Harriet are one and the same. That they were so driven to either kill Roy or driven to kill everything that Roy loved. And that finally comes to the conclusion in Roy's mind that it's like, yeah, I have met you before, and you're just like Harriet. You're thrusting a gun in my face, and you're going on and saying all these things that are to just hurt me. So we have Gus that doesn't think that Roy whatsoever will come into a factor probably for this game, because Gus is to go on and think as Roy to be a loser, and so Roy leaves. So Gus says, like, well, hey, either way, we're going to be $20,000 richer. And then they're going to lose this game. And yeah, so because also Gus has a card up his sleeve with Fowler. So this game is going to be rigged, and it's really going to go on, and like, well, hopefully they can just outrun Fowler's bad pitching. So we have Pop and we have both Red here, and Pop is decided, it's like, you know what, like, I never really wanted to win the pennant so badly. Like, you know what, any other time, win or lose, like, I would be fine with it, but like now, like, too much is riding on all this. And we again have Pop, it's like, man, I should have been a farmer. And Roy pops in and he's like, yeah, nothing's better than being on a farm. And he goes on about all the animals and fixing things. And the greenest things that you've ever seen. So, and Pop is go on and say, like, yeah, my mother told me I ought to be a farmer. And Roy says, yeah, my father told me that he wanted me to be a baseball player. So Pop turns to Roy, it's like, well, yeah, you're better than any of the baseball players I've ever known. And you're the best hitter that I've ever seen. So Pop turns to Roy and says, hey, suit up. So we get people making their way to the stadium, and Iris is going to end up being one of them. So we have Max that turns to Roy here, and it's telling him, it's like, well, hey, this is the end of the road. Either way, I'm going to get a really good story out of you. So, and we also have Max that states that I'm here to protect this game. And Max says that I'm going to make the making or breaking of the likes of you. And we end up having Roy that ends up asking Max, like, well, hey, have you ever played ball in your life? And Max is like, no, I never have. Uh, but I always make it fun to watch. And whether Roy is going to end up being the GOAT or the hero in this story, uh, Max will still make a lot of money off of a guy like Roy. So Max says, see him around. So we see Fowler in the locker room. It's like, just again teasing to the fact of this coming up. Like it, honestly, like the natural comes off as a way better, like I think, second watch than it does probably at first, just because you know a lot more of what's going on in the story. And then you're to just kind of build up, like, yeah, like this pitcher is going to be turning on this team, and so on and so forth. So the game starts going on here. They realize that Hobbs is on the field, and Hobbs tries best as he can to live in the moment. And in the crowd, we see both Iris and her son. They're clapping away. So we would, of course, go on to having Hobbs do the best he can with catching balls and trying to throw them back. But again, he's very weak. So Hobbs, when he gets to the dugout, he has his coat on him and like just trying to wait things out. So we get, of course, to where Roy gets up to bat, and eventually people are going on and they're clapping for him, and we have Roy that is to not have quite a bit of success here, because logically Roy is to have horrible timing because of his stomach, because really we just have to build to the fact that it's going to come down to the wire within this game. So Roy goes on and eventually he's out in the outfield, and after of course him being on the the bat and striking out and da da da. So when Roy is out in the outfield, he starts to notice the pitcher, and it seems that things are kind of looking very like suspicious. So specifically, Roy calls for time, and he runs to, of course, Fowler. It's like, hey, don't do it. And Fowler's like, well, hey, I'll start pitching when you start batting. And Pop runs out there. He's like, what's going on? And Roy turns to Pop. It's like, it's a bit of a surprise. And so Roy realizes that, like, yeah, he definitely needs to go on and he needs to win this game all by himself at this point. So we have Iris that leaves the stands, and she hands this note to one of these ushers or one of these guys. And the guy's like, well, hey, there's a game going on right now. And Iris is like, I don't care. Like, you need to give Roy this note. So this usher guy does go on and hand this note to this security guard. The security guard hands it to the players. The players hands it to Roy. Roy reads the note, and he's like, oh my god. We have Pop, who's kind of looking off to the side, like, hey, Roy, you okay? Like, hey, like, what's going on? So Roy reads the letter and pokes his head out, and it's just kind of like look, just to see if he can see what eventually he'll come to find through this note is to be his son. Somehow or another, both Iris and both Roy did the horizontal mumbo, and the two of them had made a child within the last 16 years of Roy's absence, of disappearance, of whatever. And so Roy then afterwards is to find that he is to need to make his way back onto the field, and Fowler is to go on and start to make this game a little bit more closer. So pushing on, so Roy gets up to bat, and they have a pitcher that is starting to throw these balls. And we get to a point where the opposition goes on and they kind of do a slapping of the arm here to bring up another pitcher. So this pitcher is to seemingly have quite a bit of success. A Nebraska farm boy, a left-hander, has a pretty good strikeout speed, so on and so forth, yada, yada, yada. So we would, of course, have Roy, who needs to go up against this pitcher. And it's kind of funny because Max at the time is having this picture about how Roy is to be this strikeout guy, and he has like deers and antlers and so on and so forth. And as Roy is to kind of finish this picture, all of a sudden Max goes on and cranks this foul ball that breaks the glass of Max's office, and Max is like, "Oh, like I wasn't paying any attention." So the further and further the pitch count goes in here, we have Roy that starts cranking foul balls as people to think, "Oh, it's going into the stands," but then it starts to go foul. It's like, ah, we're getting so much hope up. So once we go on and we get the foul ball, and Roy makes his way back to home plate, he all of a sudden realizes that his bat is broken. Oh no, not his lucky bat. So Roy turns to Bobby, the bat boy. It's like, hey, pick me a winner, Bobby. So Bobby ends up picking the bat that says Savoy Special. And so Bobby ends up handing Roy this bat. Roy looks at the bat. He's like, all right, kid. So Roy goes and gets up there, and he's starting to kind of feel very weak. The umpire's like, hey, you okay, fella? And the catcher notices there's some blood on Roy's jersey. So you would honestly think, like, because the way that there is like some patent going on with this catcher, that he would go on and have the guy get hit with the ball, or like that would make a lot of sense to really take this guy out of the game. But anyways, so instead they go on and like, okay, just kind of go on and just do another pitch here. All the guys that are to still be on base are going on, and they're like, hey, come on, Roy, you can do it. And everybody's trying to, as much as possible, give as much noise to kind of motivate Roy here. And Moy and Moy and Moy and Roy goes on to Karenka and smashes the lights. Smashes the lights. This ends up winning the game. Roy rounds the bases. The fireworks and the sparkles that are coming from out of these lights we have Memo and Gus and the judge who are in the background. They're just like, oh, well, I guess we lost. And Iris is to be just so proud. And so, yeah, so Iris was to go on and to realize that she needed to motivate Roy even much more so than he already was by telling him about his son. And so the one beautiful thing that we also see here is while Roy is rounding the bases, we see Pop, and we see him in the darkness as like the sparkling of the fireworks are still kind of gleaming off of his glasses, and it's kind of very beautiful imagery here. I probably should have gone on and probably should have used any of this as a thumbnail, but I didn't. I just kind of found this random photo of Roy at the bat, and I just used that because I just didn't have enough time to scramble all this together to probably get the best picture. But then after this, we go on and see both Roy and his son throwing the ball back and forth together, and that ends the film. And really, that is to go on to be very much reminded of like Field of Dreams to me, where we had the sequence between both passed away father and Kevin Costner throwing the ball back together. As Kevin Costner's character kind of has this choke in his throat, and he asks his father, "It's like, well, hey, Dad, like, can we throw the ball?" And the guy goes on to say, "Hey, I would like that." And then the two of them throw the ball back and forth, and that's how the movie Field of Dreams just ends in that nice little moment. So more than likely, I'm sure probably Roy's son will go on and become this athlete and become this this Whamadine superhero-ish like character. And I don't think we were ever meant to have a sequel to this film because logically, like I think this was to just be kind of the one-off story the way it does. But anyways, very beautiful and very amazing story. So at the end of the day, I think I'm gonna go out of my way to get that out of here so I can go on and upload this as well as also get all the things that I need to get done within my day. So thank you for going on and watching this. I'm sure a lot of people probably didn't check this whole 3-hour endeavor out. But without a doubt, I do appreciate anybody going on and taking the time to watch these films, or even going on to take their time to comment things, positive, negative, or anything between. Even though also uh, there were certain comments that were to just go on, just be like, okay, like I kind of get what people are saying at this point, but like yeah, I think that really just shows how butthurt I was. Yeah. I don't really care. If anything, yeah, there were certain comments that were just like, okay, these are just non-stoppingly going to happen, so I stopped them from happening. Um, but I also feel just very bad at the fact that I like honestly had to go that far. I could have just blocked people, but like I also am just like, well, I could just stop doing those kind of videos. Also, they're just be me simply going on and just doing just the simplest of things, and that probably ended up getting people just so upset for reasons I don't understand, or to probably go on and like because obviously like I'm sure people were to probably go on and probably take what I also was to probably say in the comments and probably take it the wrong way. But also, like at that point, when I'm just consistently seeing something, where I'm just like, you know what, guys, like, yeah, I'm kind of just tired of. I'm like, I get it, but I'm not really gonna change. And people again are just kind of um, just follow up with that. I'm just like, well, then obviously, people are just doing it on purpose. Like I could probably very much more understand that people want to get their in and their 2 cents in, but also at some point people don't go on and realize that I'm a human being. Also, they don't think of a YouTuber as a human being. They forget that, and that's sad. But uh, really also, I guess, like they just assume that I'm also uh, either just doing this just for the views or to get something out of people, and I'm not. Like, I'm just here to just exist, and I hope people can better understand that. That I just want to exist. I just want to enjoy and be happy with doing the projects I'm doing, and that's all that really mattered to me ever doing this YouTube thing. Um, because I wasn't happy, because I wasn't a person that enjoyed what I was doing with my life. So I hoped that this would be a thing that could change that. And that was my whole thing all along. That's all I wanted to do. And like I honestly also think that it was probably just a mistake for me to go on and do fitness YouTube shorts. But like I honestly just had the videos just lying around anyways because I was already using the videos to just get screenshots so I can use them on my Facebook, just so that way I can keep a log of what everything I'm doing. Um, and then I'm like, well, I have these videos anyways. Like, could I just make shorts of them? Is that a thing? Like, I didn't really know. And so I turned around and I used these shorts, and it seemed that people were to watch them. But then all of a sudden, that's when um, of course, when I started YouTube, I got negative comments, or every once in a while, I would go on and get these nonstop comments about one little mistake or one little thing. And that's also just to have people say, well, yeah, well, welcome to a social media or welcome to the internet. And like, I at one point was to not even really go on at certain points and really read any of the things. So like I kind of like I started to catch like keywords here and there, and then I just kind of like, oh, okay, well, that's gonna be that kind of comment again. Okay, cool. Um, so like it didn't really affect me because I really didn't pay no real focus to it, but like I was to just go on and just see it as like, okay, uh like after X number of videos of still getting the same kind of response. It's like, okay, guys, like, yeah, I get it. Like I've really, if you are to go on and watch all the other videos, you're to see the same kind of similar pattern. But yeah, like, uh, oh well. At the end of the day, I'm here to say that like I'm still probably gonna go on and still do YouTube shorts. I'm still gonna go on and do videos. I'm still gonna go on and just be me. And I hope that that's okay for everyone else. Or also, I hope that um, I really just wanted to do this videos whatsoever to not really get any get. I don't know. I'm gonna get out of here. Bye, everybody. Bye, everybody.